Okay, so I've been holding off this video for a few days because there's a lot to discuss, and it's to do with Rugby League making the same mistakes in this country that ice hockey made 20 years ago. It's almost like a carbon copy with a few differences, and it's quite worrying. It is very, very worrying considering the finances in the game and issues with attendance and TV deal. It's worrying. I'm just seeing a carbon copy of what I saw as a teenager all those years ago. So IMG have released the latest TV revenues and what was made through the TV deal. £21 million was made this year from the TV deal with Sky and the BBC. That is half as much as 3 years ago when Channel 4 signed up alongside Sky to broadcast games. That is worrying. So it's seen a drop from £42 million to £21 million. That is worrying. We're also seeing the London Broncos ownership group basically say we're going to pull the plug and we're going to put the club up for sale and find a new ownership model. Now, whether that's fan owned or another owner comes in, or there's fan and ownership, sharing responsibility for funding the club because of the IMG grading system. So when you've got someone who's invested a lot of money over many, many years and actually invested in the sport, admittedly in a non-traditional location, but he is a rugby league fan and he's actually from Swinton originally, the Hughes family. That's worrying. Now, they've pumped in £27 million of their own money into the London Broncos over many years and many moves and many iterations and many rebrands. And we can all argue some mistakes have been made with my club, the Broncos. I'm going to hold my hand up and say it's not necessarily been... The money's not always been spent wisely. However, when you've got a major investor in the sport going, I'm pulling away from the sport, it's going in the wrong direction, that is a problem. Go back in time 20 odd years, British ice hockey was in exactly the same position. They were heavily reliant on a major broadcaster, Sky, who held the reins, and major sponsors, and also owners with some deep pockets for the sport's size and how much revenue the sport actually made, which is significantly less than what Rugby League makes. Then we saw the TV deal collapse, basically. It led to the collapse of what was the British Ice Hockey Super League, which ultimately led to what we have as the Elite League and the National League now. There was a few league changes and structural changes, but the league system we have now in British Ice Hockey is a result of the Sky TV deal collapsing and investors pulling money out and owners pulling money out and the main league sponsor pulling out, which caused a lot of problems. So Heineken pulled their plug, Citizen and Seconda Watches end up pulling the plug, so we lose the main sponsors, which is a problem. And then owners started going, I'm not willing to fund a loss-making enterprise, even though the sport actually is exceptionally popular in this country. There's a pretty solid hardcore ice hockey fan base in this country. The TV deal collapsed. Sky pulled the plug. The last 2 years of the Super League, it was a struggle. Teams went out of business, and when teams went out of business, some teams decided to drop down a level and reduce their costs and reduce their player bill for wages and reduce their overseas talent. Other clubs decided to forge on and restructure the league system by forming the Elite League, which is what we still have today. Now, the league below and some of the leagues below, there was constant league structures changing, and what we have now with the Elite League and then the National League is a result of 20 years ago, and a lot of clubs going bust, a lot of fans losing their teams, and a lot of financial losses for a lot of owners. The same thing is now happening in Rugby League on a bigger scale. So we've just seen the London Broncos ownership group basically say we're pulling the plug, we're going to find a buyer for the club, or we're going to give it over to a fan's trust. We don't know what's going to happen. We have a very uncertain future. As a Broncos fan, it's very worrying, and I was concerned that if we fell out of Super League, that could be the death of a club that I've supported since 1996. Yeah, that's most of my life. Now, clubs in the more traditional heartlands are also struggling. That's worrying. But then when you've got the two biggest clubs in the game, arguably, in Wigan and St Helens reporting losses, that is a bigger problem. Now, Leeds have got a pretty big fan base. Warrington are also doing pretty well. But we've seen the demise of the Bradford Bulls. They're not in the Super League right now. They've had financial issues. They've gone bust twice, actually, with administration. And Widnes have struggled as well. Other clubs are also struggling, who are very established Super League and Championship sides, who are basically heartland clubs. Some of them are foundation clubs. When you've got clubs of that standing in the game, historically, announcing losses year on year, it's worrying. Now, I've been highly critical of IMG's involvement in the game, the grading system and how it works, and the time frame given to clubs to try and get up to grade A or a higher grade B standard. It is not going to be done in a sustainable way. The TV deal is a big problem. It's a big problem. It's worth half as much now as 3 years ago, before IMG and the partnership with the RFL became a thing. It was announced that they were going to come in, but this is before IMG get on the scene. So before IMG come along, the TV deal was worth 42 million. It's now worth 21 million. At peak, it was worth a hell of a lot more in the 90s and the 2000s into the 2010s than it is now. So the TV deal is worth a lot less money in actual and real terms, and clubs are making losses. It's British ice hockey in rugby league form. Now, there'll be a lot of rugby league fans going, why is he talking about British ice hockey? We have no interest in that. There'll be ice hockey fans who are like, why is he talking about rugby league? Because parallels. Now, the situation with British ice hockey 20 years ago is a little bit different to the situation in European rugby league now, the Super League, with the two French clubs. A bit different. Social media wasn't a thing. Internet usage was nowhere near as high as it is now. And more people, ironically, Sky as a broadcaster was growing quite rapidly. More and more people every year were signing up to subscriptions. That has now plateaued. Less people are interested in subscription sports TV now. There's a pushback against too much being put behind a paywall, and people have less money in their pockets in real terms. The economy has struggled in the last 10 years, especially in the last few years. People are struggling to heat their homes and feed their families. And that's having a knock-on effect. The economy isn't doing well, and people are cancelling their Sky TV. Now, Rugby League is very heavily reliant on Sky. You've got the BBC in there, yes, and we had Channel 4 before, but it's heavily reliant on Sky. Sky can pull the plug at any time. It will kill the sport. Much like what happened with ice hockey 20 years ago. Sky pulled the plug, the league collapsed, clubs went bust very quickly, other clubs decided to drop to semi-pro or amateur status to survive. We're seeing that repeated right now. Right now, we know clubs are very close to going out of business. Very close. Some clubs have a very uncertain future. Halifax are in deep trouble. Whitehaven are in deep trouble. Swinton are struggling. These are established clubs from the heartlands. Huddersfield are struggling to draw fans. They're without Huddersfield, we don't have rugby league. And that meeting in that hotel, the Northern Union, without Huddersfield as a location, we don't have rugby league, as we know it. When you've got Wigan and St Helens making losses, that is concerning. When Magic Round gets the second lowest attendance ever, and the RFL says that's a success, that is concerning. We saw the same issues with ice hockey. Attendances were doing really, really well. The game was doing really, really well. However, it was not funded sustainably and was heavily reliant on a TV deal that basically, when they pulled the plug, damn near killed the sport for a while. The sport really took a massive hit. It's taken a very long time for the sport to recover to what it is now. We are now starting to see British ice hockey clubs doing well in the European CHL, and we're now seeing a lot of homegrown talent do really well, not only domestically, but also internationally, like playing in other leagues overseas, which we weren't before. Now, ice hockey still has massive financial uncertainty. Teams are still struggling financially. Teams are folding and being reformed all the time. It's a massive concern every ice hockey fan in this country has is, will my team be existing next year? Since this channel's been going, several teams have gone out of business or have dropped down a level to financially survive. We've seen teams have to crowdfund for survival and ask for donations from just the wider hockey family to survive. We are now seeing that in Rugby League. Rugby League is worth more money, has a much bigger fan base, and is much more established in this country. But when you've got established clubs from the heartland areas, we're not including London and the Midlands in this, but there are the same issues there, having to crowdfund and try and raise donations through donation campaigns just so they can pay their players to complete the season, that is a concern. And I do fear, in the short to medium term, for the future of the sport. IMG are signed up with the RFL for another 9 years. I fear a lot of clubs will go to the wall well before then. And what is more concerning for me is I do fear for the Broncos' future, but that Wigan and St Helens are making these losses right now. Now, the way the grading works, they're safe. They're going to be Super League clubs. And from what I can gather going forward, I think promotion from the Championship to Super League is going to be based on a grading basis. I think promotion relegation should remain, personally. And I think that's a big mistake, getting rid of a traditional part of the game. We had licensing before and a closed shop before. It didn't work. Clubs got rid of it. And when Bradford and Widnes had their financial problems, it really highlighted closing it off was a problem. So I do fear for Rugby League in the next 3 to 5 years. I think before the end of the IMG contract, I think big clubs are going bust. Not medium side, we're talking well-established Super League sides will be hitting the wall financially. Do you want another Bradford Bulls? Do you want another Widnes Vikings? I would say no. But when you've got clubs like Halifax fighting off winding up orders, when you've got Whitehaven crowdfunding to try and just get their players paid to the end of the season so they can complete their fixtures, when you've got an ownership group in London Broncos who've been around for 27 years and pumped a lot of money in, we're talking millions, withdrawing their investment from the sport as a whole, not just from the club, but the sport as a whole, that is a very, very worrying sign. Very worrying sign. And I've been watching this season with great interest in regards to what's happening off the field. And every time I go on a fan forum or go on a fan page on social media, yeah, it's not a happy bunch of fans from wherever you are in the country, from wherever. There's a lot of frustration. Now, not everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, but there's a lot of frustration and a lot of concern and a lot of worry. Firstly, with all the rule changes, that's the RFL's, decision to start changing rules and bringing in punishments for players, for dirty play. But the financial side of things, the TV deal side of things, very, very concerning. And as an ice hockey fan as well, I've been here, done that, got the T-shirt, seen teams go bust, see leagues collapse, see TV deals collapse, and see the sport struggle for a long time. To get to where it is, to get ice hockey back to where it is now, took a very, very long time. 2 decades. Some of the players and teams that I watched when I was a teenager, players have had to give up the game because it's just they're not making money. And teams that I watched play against my local team don't exist anymore. And my teams the Bees had to move. Not only from the town they played in to a different location in the county and rebrand. They're still called the Bees, but they've had to rebrand and start all over again. They nearly went bust on more than one occasion. They were national champions at one point. They were the best team in the country 2.5 decades ago. And I've seen the fortunes of the sport, a sport that I love, take 2 decades to recover to a point where it's nearly back on par on where it was in the mid-90s to the early 2000s. Nearly. It might be in a slightly healthier place, but it took 2 decades. Can Rugby League afford to take that long to get back to where it was a decade, 2 decades ago? Can it afford to do that? I would argue that's potentially could be the death knell of the sport, as we know, as a professional game, because they're too reliant on the Sky money, and the Sky money isn't enough. This is a heavily gate-driven league. And in some cases, fans are just not turning up anymore for a variety of reasons, whether it's to do with rule changes and the way that the game has evolved, not necessarily for the better, or it's because they just can't afford to do so anymore. The sport is at a key crossroads, and I think it's heading in the wrong direction. But that's my 2 cents on it. Not everyone's going to agree with everything I say, but I'm deeply worried about the direction Rugby League in England is taking right now. In fact, the whole of the UK is taking right now. It's a very worrying, slippery slope they're on, and I fear it's going to go the wrong way rather than the right way, and I don't think the grading system is actually going to pay off. I think clubs are going to overextend themselves financially at a time when the big clubs are losing money. Yeah, I'm just not sold on the direction the sport is going with the RFL, the current RFL board, and IMG's involvement. I haven't been from the start. I've been deeply concerned from the start. And I'm concerned for the future, not just of my club, but the greatest game of all as a whole going forward. Now, the NRL has hinted at potentially buying into rugby league in this country and investing, but nothing concrete. We've only heard speculation and a few reports, but nothing's been concrete. And again, uncertainty is never a good sign. It's a very worrying sign. So there's a lot of clubs there's a lot of individual clubs right now that are very uncertain futures and a lot of uncertainty about finances and ownership. And there's a lot of losses being made. Clubs aren't making money. The sport is at a financial crossroads as well. But place your thoughts on the current state of rugby league in this country in the comment section below. Very interesting to hear your thoughts on it. And I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon. Also, remember, memberships are available, and I want to hear from some ice hockey fans about your memories of the collapse of the Ice Hockey Super League 20 odd years ago and the ramifications, that collapse of the TV deal, the sponsorship deal, and what happened to your local team then. Is it similar to what's happening now with Rugby League, or is it not? Because I'll be very interested to hear from ice hockey fans as well. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, there are memberships available. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. That does help. Leave your comments in the comment section below. I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.